Welcome back to DM Gives Inspiration. Today we're going to be talking about montages, an adaptation of skill challenges, which we discussed in Season 6, Episode 1. If you're not familiar with skill checks as a whole, be sure to head back to that episode. A skill challenge represents something difficult the players have to accomplish, usually outside of combat. This could be working controls they found in a dungeon, or putting out a fire in a town, doing a chase sequence, or escaping from a collapsing castle. In a normal skill challenge, these multiple rolls from multiple players build up until you reach success or failure. Usually 3 successes before 3 failures, and that decides the outcome of the scene, the skill challenge. In a skill challenge, it's important that the DM has some stakes involved, otherwise the players will just keep rolling until they get a high enough result to be a success. If there's no threat or time limit, then the players should just take 10, and you as DM should showcase what their character does as their normal level of skill in that ability. Montages are a little different. Their main purpose is to show the passage of time, instead of getting a result like a success or a failure. Now, the first place your brain probably goes when you hear montage is a training montage, like Rocky or Karate Kid. A training montage is a controlled story device, where we showcase a character becoming good at something. That is impossible in D&D. You can't guarantee that your players are going to have bad rolls at the start of the montage, and then have great rolls at the end. The kind of montage we're talking about is like the one you would see in the middle of the 1984 movie Ghostbusters. After setting up shop as the Ghostbusters, the crew has their first real quest or job at the Sedgwick Hotel, which would be an actual role-played session that you would do like a one-shot. Going down the hallways, fighting in the dining room, all of that would be normally played out. But then our story wants to go from brand new company to well-established Ghostbusters. So we have a montage that showcases what daily life was like doing that job. And that's the kind of montage we're talking about today. Showcasing daily life to our heroes, what it's like to be an adventurer day in and day out. This is particularly valuable in those early parts of a campaign, where the players are still figuring out who they are, what the threats of the world are. If you're doing a undead campaign, those players should, in order to do some world building, fight a lot of zombies. But we want to vary D&D combat to make it interesting. So what normally happens is you fight one horde of zombies, and then you move on to ghouls, and then you move on to ghosts, and every single fight is with something different. That's not how the real world would work. That's not how pest control works. An exterminator doesn't head out every day and fight a new type of bug. Nature doesn't release new insects every year just to keep things interesting for the exterminator. If you or your players are particularly interested in getting to, let's say, level 3, you could use a montage to speed players along the path, giving them full gold and XP for the missions that they completed, though we did them in a shortened format. Through that montage, you are showing how your world functions, what the repeat threats are, what the players can expect into the future, what is the normal of this world, and how they will know things are abnormal later on. A montage really works best in those low levels when there's a lot of haphazardness and clumsiness to the players. They're still figuring out what they can do, and a montage could help point them in the right direction. Showcase some skills and how they can be used in your world. What sort of items or abilities might have an impact in different situations. It's also a chance to build some camaraderie amongst the player characters. Though of course it will be artificial because you're the one telling the story. Enough about the principles for now. Let's talk about how this is actually going to function at your table. There are 2 main ways you're going to introduce a montage. One is you just tell everybody, today we're going to play through a montage that'll encapsulate the next 3 weeks. Or you could theme it up a little bit and say something like, it's been 3 weeks since our quest in the previous session. Over that time, you took a number of jobs off the board. Your first job took place in the swamps outside of town where you fought giant wasps. And now you've entered the montage. Depending on the experience of your players, you may have to spell it out even more than that. We are going to be doing a series of skill challenges. I may request certain skills or roles from you, but feel free to make your own suggestions, use magic items, use spells or special abilities to overcome the segment of the montage, this particular skill challenge. This is cooperative storytelling at its most basic. You present an idea, the players are going to give their interpretation of the idea, and then you tell the results. So in its most simplest form, this could just be a single attack that sums up the entire battle, or what an entire quest could have been. In our giant wasp swamp example, you can roll one attack. It's a 16. Everybody with an AC lower than 16 was stung. Now we tell the players how that impacted them, what the result of their success or failure means to the overall perspective of the story. The adventurers return to town covered in lumps, stingers hanging out of their skin. What do the townsfolk think of this? How does their prestige or renown grow or diminish? If they come back with no lumps on them and no stings, a big net full of nasty giant wasps, that's going to make the adventurers look and feel good at their jobs. Now the players know that the world has giant wasps in it, though we may not have ever wanted to have a whole play session dedicated to fighting giant wasps. But not all the scenes should be so simple. After all, it is a montage showcasing many different types of adventures the heroes went on during these 3 weeks. We could have a firefighting scenario where the players battle an inferno. That sort of scenario has a lot more options to it. You still want to be prepared though with some autofill options. Here we might have nature to deduce how the fire is going to rampage through the building and help battle the flame, or strength to haul buckets of water. However, we could have other options as well, such as animal handling, to help a cart full of water make it up to the building without the horse getting spooked. One of your players might have the spell Create or Destroy Water, which would be really cool to use here, though they might not think of it. You may be able to prod them in that direction. In this way, the montage becomes a learning opportunity, a tool for you to showcase what the players can do. A scene in your montage might be battling a horde of poisonous snakes that have overtaken the town well. Using that scene, you remind your cleric and your paladin that they can get rid of poisons, help out the townfolk. You could also make a scene that showcases how to use a lesser-known skill in your game. Your players could help solve a murder, using medicine or investigation. Maybe they have to infiltrate a coven of cultists, and so you make them roll religion checks to pretend to be followers of the dark god. You don't have a rogue? Come up with a reason why they might need a sleight of hand check. Maybe they need to steal a poisoned tart off a hag's shop cart. These skill checks can be as basic or as complicated as you want. Ultimately, the montage as a total is showcasing many different kinds of scenes, with many different kinds of challenges in them. If you had the players try to disperse a crowd, they can use Intimidate, Diplomacy, or any number of skills with that. And that would be just one scene that makes up the greater montage. But always make sure to check in. What is the result at the end, and how does that impact the story? Going forward, they might be the adventurers who are really good at killing wasps, but are terrible at putting out fires. Yes, they're the adventurers who solved the murder in town, but their people skills could use some work. Through this montage, the DM should want the players to succeed, or at the very least get a better view of the world. Failures should be funny, successes should be rewarded, but never at any point during a montage are they in mortal peril. Nothing permanently bad is going to happen as a result of our montage here. The building burned down for good. That building's gone. But nothing really bad happened. If you did want something important to happen as a result of that burned down building, well then we should have played through it like a normal game. We shouldn't have used it in the montage at all. And same goes for success. We're not going to defeat our big bad guy in a montage skill challenge. Successes reward XP, money, items, renown, prestige, fame, more work, better jobs down the road, connections with NPCs, ease of passage through future areas. A failure means embarrassment, shame, visible injury when returning to town, curses. Their income may be affected, the town might be angry at them, the destruction is visible. You could throw in a little moment at the end of a scene where someone asks for their autograph, or someone berates them, and then you move on to the next scene. It's not a replacement for roleplay. Telling your players that they have fun drinking at the inn after the day's work does not mean the players will actually be more friendly towards each other. But that moment in their history, that shared experience, makes their story richer. There are several things you'll want to consider while making a montage for your players. There are the things we've already talked about, like setting up all the different scenes, picking out the skills involved, making opportunities to teach them about different mechanics or a skill that they haven't used before, showcasing backstory, telling the players a little bit about your world, what its primary threats or just daily threats might be. But you of course want to make this custom for your players. If you don't have a wizard, warlock, or bard in your party, chances are the majority of your players are going to have bad intelligence-based skill checks. Therefore, you probably don't want to write a lot of scenes in your montage that are based around intelligence skill checks. This would be things like arcana, history, investigation, nature, and religion. Likewise, no clerics or druids. You might want to pass on heavy wisdom-based scenes or skill checks. Pick out one or two of these scenes in your montage that players can actually roleplay in real time in. Some should be speedy, like our wasp slaying scenario. Others, like calming down that crowd, could be played out in real time. We are using the montage to speed us to the point of most importance for that scenario. Then as soon as we have our result, our successful check or failure, move on to the next scene. Once you've played with that a little bit, you can start inserting mini montages into your games. Start your session with a light montage as to what they were doing just yesterday, before we get to the big real-time quests we're going to be playing through today. This is essentially what happens in action movies. Our hero is performing something of their daily life, a mission that isn't really a big part of the later story, but we get to know the character. Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Golden Idol is a great example of this, though we do get introduced to Belloc, which is a great story device, and he's important later on. Perhaps the best example of this is from the 2017 film Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where it opens up with the crew fighting some sort of wild tentacle monster that doesn't really matter to our greater story. But it gave us a nice theme, it showcased how the heroes have advanced since the previous film, and the players, and in this case the movie-going audience, is aware that this universe has giant tentacle beasts in them, and it's something we might want to consider in the future. What is it? How did it get there? How did our heroes get there? If those things matter, then we wouldn't do a montage, you'd play through them in an actual game session. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I hope this gives you an additional tool to showcase your world and story to your players. We'll talk about other storytelling devices as the season continues. This show is supported by the patrons over at patreon.com/Kyle Fergusson, 2 S's in Fergusson. Music was by Brian Griffith, and I'll see you next week with more DM Gives Inspiration.